Hello everybody, John here from the Esports department going over the LCK rosters and futures, and I'm going to set your expectations going right into this one. This is by far the least interesting of the preseason roster and futures videos. There have not been a ton of roster moves in the LCK. The ones that have happened mostly seem like they have at least some chance of being kind of inconsequential, like players that we may or may not even see to begin with. Um, just not a ton of changes and almost nothing that really makes you think that a team is going to be a significantly higher or lower tier than they were last split. So just not the most interesting stuff happening in the LCK. But we'll do it. We'll go over it. We'll look at the odds and compare them to how I'm feeling about some of these teams, and see if we can come up with anything that has any value over in the LCK. Let's start with the Afrika Freaks. Keen, Dread, Fly, Bang, Lehens, all still on the roster. They do have Leo, who comes from Live Sandbox, and they have Mapsy down here at support as a possibility. But this is one of those situations where, at least for Mapsy, I have a hard time seeing him become the starting player. Lehens just is so entrenched and didn't have too bad of a year last year, I think, or last split. I think we'll see Lehens for the most part. We could see Leo over Bang, just because the style that Bang plays is not a style that a team always wants to play, and the Afrika Freaks were like arguably the biggest underperformance of like any team in any league in spring. So there's no way that the Afrika Freaks are happy with how spring went. So maybe we could see Leo. I don't think we'll really see Mapsy. All we can hope for is that Afrika steps up a little bit from their performance in spring, because they have Keen is a monster. We've seen some really special things from Dread in the past. Lehens has a hell of a pedigree. It's really, Fly has always just kind of been a middle of the road, lose to most of the decent mid laners type mid, and then they've struggled with the style that Bang wanted to play in spring. So we may see the Leo. I don't expect much difference from Afrika going into summer. Maybe a slight improvement from where they were in spring, but I don't think you're going to see a huge resurgence from this Afrika Freaks team. Moving over to DRX, Kingen, Pyosik, Solka, Bao, Becca, the lineup that they went with for the majority of spring. Right there again. They have Destroy, who was on the roster at this time, and probably I don't think we're going to see him overtake Kingen for the starting spot unless something happened in the off season that we're not aware of. It seems like DRX will run it back. They were a big overperformance for the majority of spring, so they have a lot of reason to just continue doing what they were doing. Hopefully a little off season for some of these younger guys. I mean, Solka, Bao, Becca, guys that were not that were rookies to the LCK. Hopefully, they have a little bit more time to gel in the offseason, move up a little bit. There's also the argument that maybe a team like this falls down a little bit after teams get a little bit more used to them, which is something that I think happened to them really badly in spring. We've seen this before, too, with teams like Victory 5 in the LPL. Sometimes a team of, like, kind of younger, unknown guys gets together, and they have a way that they like to play that really takes people by surprise, and they overperform for half a split or a split, and then people start figuring out how to play against the style that they like to play, and they have a hard time adjusting. So DRX feels like a team that could go up a spot, down a spot. I don't think we're going to see a drastic fall off to last place, but I also don't think we're looking at a title contender in DRX here, or even a Worlds contender. So probably a give or take range of 1 or 2 spots from where they finished in spring, and I don't think too much will change for this squad. Looking over to Damn One Gaming, they just got back from MSI. Khan, Canyon, Showmaker, Ghost, Barrel, they're all still here. The one kind of interesting difference for this team, I think, is Rongjun coming from Damn One Gaming Academy. We've heard about Showmaker's health issues at MSI. They talked about it. He played it out, but they talked about the health issues at MSI. They talked about it at the end of the summer split, or end of the spring split. There's some chance we could see some Rongjun at some point in this split. And Rongjun is a prospect, but I mean, obviously he's not going to be, we're not going to expect him at least to be on the level of Showmaker. I mean, it's hard not to make Damn One Gaming your favorites going into summer regardless. They've just been so dominant in their last 2 splits. And they battled, at MSI. They didn't look great at MSI, but they battled and pretty much showed that they were better than the better teams from other regions other than RNG. And they struggled a little bit with RNG, but I don't think we're too worried about Damwon Gaming going into summer. I think they're pretty decisively a top 3 team in the LCK, and we should see them going back to Worlds again this year. Moving over to Fred Brion, a team that we all kind of wish would have made some changes, but it's Hoya, Chieftain and Umpty, Lava and Yaharong, Henna and Delight. Probably likely to see more Yaharong, I think. Umpty and Chieftain probably are going back and forth, maybe leaning towards Umpty. This team was just very bad in spring, and unfortunately they haven't done anything to make me think they're not going to be very bad in summer. No real moves here. Nothing for me to really comment on as a way for them to improve. I just don't really have anything going for you. Yaharong came in before spring, but that's the best. No off-season moves. It's just a little bit surprising for me with how bad they were that they wouldn't take a shot at a prospect somewhere around here. I guess they're going to wait for next year. They're going to wait for some contracts to expire maybe, and see who they can get for next year. But Fred Brion putting themselves in a really bad spot. They did have some mild improvement towards the end of the split. Maybe they came together a little bit in the off season, but I think you're looking at a ceiling of like 8th place for Fred Brion. Just not exciting and no moves to be made. A little disappointing on Fred Brion, if I'm honest. Going over to GENG, it's a pretty similar story. We've got Rascal, we've got Clid, we've got BDD, we got Ruler, and we got Life. This team has had backups. They've had Flawless that's come in and play some games here and there. Karis has played some games here and there. They have Bertol that was added before spring, but we haven't seen, I don't believe. So, once again, no changes, same roster, basically running it back. GENG feels like a team that's like a perpetual third placer. But I'll give them the credit in saying that I think if the metagame moved in a way that was more beneficial for them, if we were super AD carry focused, which is something that I think would help them against a team like Damwon Gaming, who has looked a little uncomfortable when it's been AD carry focused metas. If we saw an AD carry focused meta, maybe you could see GENG win summer. They only really have like 2 to 3 pieces of competition in the league, and getting a step up over Damwon would be really big. Like I said, given that Damwon's bot lane is really kind of underperforming at the moment, Ruler and Life is a pretty solid bot lane to take advantage of that. So GENG could win summer, but I think you're looking at them just as one of those top 3, top 4, pretty solid chance to go to Worlds type teams, but probably not a contender to win the split. I mean, they're going to be a contender, but they're not among the couple favorites, I don't think. Just a little bit stagnant with the GENG roster, trying to figure out how to make this roster work because they have so much talent here, but they've had consistent underperformances their last few major tournaments. Looking over to Hanwha Life, it's Dudu and Morgan in the top lane, Arthur and Johan in the jungle, Chovy, Def, Vista. It's the same lineup we saw in spring once again. The LCK just really allergic to off-season moves. When I said at the beginning of this video that it wasn't going to be very exciting, I was telling the bare bones truth, because literally almost none of these teams have different starting lineups than the ones that they played in spring. Only some of them have even picked up other ancillary pieces. I expect to see Arthur full-time in summer, I will say that. I would expect to see Morgan full-time in summer. I'm not sure that that's going to be true, but I think Morgan is the better player out of Morgan and Dudu, and I think with an off-season here to get him integrated, I'm hoping they figure Morgan out. With Arthur and then Chovy, Deft, and Vista, it's another one of those top 4 teams, pretty similar to GENG, a team that I think is pretty unlikely to win the LCK, but you're definitely going to see them deep in the playoffs. I'd be extremely surprised if we don't see these guys like top 4 or 5 in summer here. There's just a huge talent drop-off between like 4th, 5th, and the rest of the teams in the LCK, where it's really hard not to see HLE making a reasonably deep playoff run. Over to KT Rolster, Doran, Blank and Gideon, Dove and UCal, Noah, Harp, Zeus. So the only difference here is Harp. Harp comes from KT Challengers. very possible that we'll actually see Hart playing KT a pretty big underperformance. They did lose Hybrid, so they're going to have to play Noah, but Noah has been around for a little bit. They're going to have to start playing him. Just another team down there stuck in the kind of talent pool at the bottom where if Gideon takes a real step forward, we've seen a lot of things from Doran. Dove and UCal have both had pretty great splits at different times. The bot lane is going to continue to be a problem, I think. I don't think Harp is going to fix the fact that even like the Hybrid Zeus bot lane they were playing last time was just a complete nightmare. And Hybrid had looked good on other teams. So the bot lane will be the big problem for KT. If they see a return to performance from Dove and UCal, if Gideon takes his step forward as one of the most prized prospects in the league, you could see this team maybe making the playoffs. But once again, it just feels near impossible that this team would challenge for the title. Just another team that could maybe slip into the playoffs along with some other teams. Your DRXs of the world, your Afrika Freaks. Just a team that's looking to sneak into the playoffs, but probably not anything further than that. My favorite team that's looking to do that is this next one, which is Live Sandbox. They have Summit is, I would assume, going to be the full-time top laner, even though they have Howling on the roster. Croco and OnFleek, they can go back and forth between two pretty good junglers. OnFleek had some really terrible series in spring, but also in the past has been a very high-level jungler. Croco has looked like the better of the two of them as of recently, so I would assume we're going to see Croco. In the mid lane, Fate. In the bot lane, they just picked up Prince in the middle of last split, so I'm a little bit surprised to see them go pick up another AD carry, but they have King Kong come up from LSB Challenger, and he has such a great name that I hope he's awesome. His stats in Challenger were solid. He looks like he's going to be an all-right AD carry. I'm hoping he's a superstar because I kind of like this roster. They have Effort at support, formerly of T1, as everybody's aware. This roster just has more talent than some of these other rosters, like the KT roster and the DRX roster, in my opinion. It's just about whether or not they can get it together. I think Summit is absurd when he's on form. Croco was very good last time. I think Fate has really blossomed into a very, very good mid laner. He's not going to be on the level of some of the absolute studs like Chovy that we have in this league, but I think Fate's a very, very good mid laner. I think Effort has been a very, very good support, and it's really going to come down to whether these AD carries can gel with the team, Prince and King Kong. I think this team has a lot of talent. They would be my pick to be that like playoff sneak-in team versus some of those other squads that we've looked at. I just really kind of like what they've done. I hope that it works out for them because I think they have a ton of talent on this team that's kind of untapped in their results so far. But I'm going to be having a fair bit of faith in Live Sandbox. Moving over to NonShim Red Force. Rich, Peanut, Diokdam, Wayne, Kellen, all guys that were on the team last time. The new spot on the team is Gory. Gory coming from EDG, and he comes out of the T1 system. We didn't get to see him much over on EDG, but I'm guessing he's looking like a nice prospect behind the scenes here. Unfortunately, I really don't think he's going to do a lot to improve this NonShim Red Force team. If you're someone who's followed me for a while, I had very, very high hopes for the NonShim Red Force coming into spring. I predicted them to be like a top 5 team in the league or something, top 4 team in the league. I really thought that this team was going to be looking good with Peanut coming in and an extra offseason to gel. I thought they were going to be looking sweet coming into spring, and they just let me down in just about every way I could be let down. Everybody took a step back for me. I thought Rich was a step worse. I thought Peanut was a step worse coming onto this team. I thought Diokdam took a step back. I was just not impressed at all with NonShim Red Force. Hopefully, another offseason, the addition of Gory, hopefully that helps out. I mean, they had real problems in the mid lane for sure. Bay was a big problem. So if Gory comes in here and is kind of a stud, this team could take a step forward. Maybe you're looking at like bordering on playoffs. I think that's like kind of the ceiling, is maybe they sneak into the last playoff spot just barely. But that's kind of the way the LCK just looks to me this split, is that, like I say, the talent gaps between the top few teams and the rest of the teams are so huge that really all these other teams can hope for is to sneak into the playoffs. It's not like some other leagues where I could see a lower ranked team, like in the LCS. Obviously, after game one, this is less true, but like in the LCS, I said, there's an outside world where CLG wins this thing. Or looking at the LPL, let's say there's an outside world where LNG comes in and wins this thing. In the LCK, I just don't see who an outside team that could come in and compete with these top 3 to 4 teams is. It feels like who's going to make the playoffs and not go to Worlds. It's just not very exciting. I don't think the LCK is looking nearly as pumped this split as the LPL, the LCS, even the LEC. LEC is a super banger when we get to the LEC. Let's go over to the T1 side. Canna and Zeus, Cuz and Elam, with owner as well. Closer and Faker, Gumayusi and Teddy, Carrier at support. Same thing they were doing last split. Who knows which versions of the roster we're going to see at which times. The most frustrating team in the LCK is they have an just overload of talent, just like an absolutely absurd amount of talent, but just played in completely random patterns. Obviously, we mostly saw them last split stick with like the quote-unquote old man lineup with like Faker and Teddy and Cuz, or they would go young with Closer and Gumayusi. I hope they've figured out in the offseason what they want to do, because there's so much talent on the team that if they figure it out, I think they might even be favorites to win the LCK if they can figure out this roster, which roster is best, get those guys reps together. That's all I want to see from T1. I think T1 is the favorite if you tell me that coming into this split, they've figured out who the best 5 of these guys are and they're going to play them in 80% of their matches. If you tell me that, I think T1's the favorite to win the split. I think that's kind of unlikely, and so I still think Damwon Gaming is probably the favorite to win the split. But T1 is a team for me that should be the favorite if their coaching staff is doing their job and they're figuring out what's going on here. And I'm sure they have to navigate some politics when you have Faker on your team, even when you have Teddy on your team, who commands a lot, even when you have Carrier on your team. When you have some of these guys, I know Carrier was a rookie recently, but when you have a guy that costs that kind of money and you brought him in, he has some sway. And if he's saying, I came over here to play with Faker, then maybe that's causing them those kinds of problems, But regardless of what it is, if this team has figured out their roster and what they're going to do, I think they're the favorite for Summer Split. Let's look at Bovada's odds for the LCK, and we'll look at my power rankings as written over here. I didn't do this right. Sorry, everyone. You're going to get spoilered. I just like it to look so nice and clean. Ah, nice and clean. So for my power rankings, we've got Damwon Gaming in first, T1 in second, GENG third, and HLE fourth. I think these are your only teams that have any chance of winning the split. So when we're talking futures, I'm not looking at any team that's not these teams. Because even though I said, I think Live Sandbox has a lot of upside, and I do have Sandbox 5th, DRX 6th, Afrika 7th, KT 8th, NonShim 9th, and Freda Brion 10th. Normally, this kind of area is where I'm looking for value in my futures. But in the LCK, I just don't feel like these teams have the talent, as I've mentioned 20 times. So I think the only spots I would be willing to look at to bet futures is these 4. So we need to figure out how those compare and what the odds look like for them. So Bovada has Damwon Gaming rated as the favorite, but they have them at minus 120. No chance. Never touching a team at minus 120 like this. Now, I have bet a team at negative odds to win the split before, but it was G2 in Europe, and there was such a massive talent gap there that I think it might have been worth it. Damwon Gaming's talent gap over GENG and T1, and to some degree HLE, is not big enough for sure to be minus 120. So I'm not even considering Damwon at minus 120. GENG at plus 275. The problem for GENG is I actually have them rated third, and Bovada has them rated second. So I think there's a team that has better odds and a better chance to win. I'd rather just bet them rather than betting GENG, and that's T1 at plus 450. The only bet I'm considering from the LCK is T1 at plus 450. HLE's at plus 800, and it wants to entice me, but I do think all 3 of these teams have enough of a talent edge against HLE that I wouldn't expect HLE to be able to really win 1 in 8 times. If this was like a plus 1600 or a plus 2000 type number on HLE, I think I would take a shot on them, but this just feels a little too low to me. For me, T1 is really the only spot that looks like it's reasonable at plus 450. I do think they're the second most likely team to win, most likely if they have some things figured out. It's really the only thing I like in the LCK futures. Hopefully I end up being right about that. I'm not even 100% sure that I'm going to bet it. 4.5 to 1 isn't like as exciting to me as some of the odds I've gotten in the other leagues. Obviously after day one, this one's not looking too exciting either, but 100 Thieves at 10 to 1 I thought was just like much sexier than this T1 at 4.5 to 1. I will end up betting the T1, I think, though. I'm probably going to have to wait another day or so to really pound it in, but I do think I'll probably end up betting T1 at 4.5 to 1. I do think they're the favorite to win the league if they have a roster figured out. So 4.5 to 1 on the team that I envision as the favorite. Just seems too good to be true. With Damwon's fall off at MSI as well and starting to show some cracks in their armor, as most teams usually do, feels like a good time to be on the T1 train. So plus 450 on T1 feels like a good spot. And that's where I'm at for the LCK. It's pretty boring, guys. Not very many roster changes. Not very many things worth talking about. Just kind of a resurgence of hope for me from T1. I had hope for T1 in Spring Split as well, and they didn't quite live up to what I was looking for, so we'll run it back in summer and see how it looks. I'll talk to you guys later. We have the LEC left to do in the next couple days. The LEC is a true banger, so we'll have some real fun with that. But then it's on to the split. Check out the Esports department if you want the daily videos for the LPL and LCK, as well as the Western Leagues with the Infinity Edge guys. We'll give you the stuff you need to know to do some betting and daily fantasy on your League of Legends lineups. So I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good rest of the day.